Hello all, and welcome back to Room 66. In tonight's story, a close friend of ours tells about the time him and his wife were abducted in Mexico. So let's get right into it. My wife is extremely close with her family, which is what makes it so difficult for her to live so far away from them. You see, we live in Long Beach, California. Meanwhile, her family lives in a small village right outside of Mexico City. We take the trip to see them at least twice a year, but this trip was different. Her sister was scheduled to be induced into labor with her first child, and my wife was not going to miss her nephew's birth. So the day before she was scheduled, we flew out to Mexico City. We had everything ready to go, from the tickets to our hotel to all the presents my wife got. We stayed in Mexico City because that was where the hospital was, and by the time we arrived, her sister would already be admitted. The day came to fly out, and my wife couldn't have been more excited to see her family and to meet her nephew. Our flight was at 11:30 in the morning, so we wouldn't arrive in Mexico City until about 5:30 p.m. their time. The whole flight, my wife was shaking with excitement. I didn't understand why I was so nervous. I mean, we had been there to visit her family a million times, but something about this time just felt different. After what seemed like the longest flight ever, we finally landed in the city. We got off the plane and headed to baggage claim. We waited for our bags to come around, and when they finally did, one of my wife's bags was missing. The bag that had all her presents that she had gotten for her sister. She was absolutely devastated, but all she could do was hope the airline found it and could mail it to her sister's house. So she left her info and her sister's address, and we headed to the hotel. Our hotel was only a short walk from the hospital, so we decided not to rent a car and to just use the taxi system to save some money. The whole 30-minute drive to the hotel, I tried to cheer my wife up after losing all of her gifts, but I figured only seeing her family was going to do the trick. So as soon as we got there, we were dropped off and checked into our rooms. We took a quick shower and walked over to the hospital. As soon as we walked in, the whole waiting room was filled with her family, and her face instantly lit up. I said hello to all of them, but that's about all I could say because other than food orders, the only Spanish I spoke was hola. You would think I've been here so many times that I would have picked up more, but I guess my brain just doesn't work that way. So when we are here, I just kind of explore by myself, which is what I decided to do while my wife stayed at the hospital. After about an hour or so of walking around the city, I began to feel the long flight catching up to me, and I felt super tired. So I took the short stroll back to the hotel, but when I got there, I realized I didn't have the key to the room. From there, I had two choices. One, to walk back to the hospital and get the key from my wife, or just go to the front desk and get a new key. I decided to take the easy way out and go to the desk, and that's where I believe I messed up, but I'll explain that later. Anyway, I walked in, and the first thing I noticed was that the lady that had originally checked us in wasn't who was at the desk. I figured we probably checked in at the end of the other lady's shift, so I walked up to the new lady and explained that I was already a guest and that I just needed a new key. It took a couple of tries for her to understand what I was saying. Again, my wife normally talks to people for me here. She asked for my ID for confirmation that it was indeed my room, and that I'm not just some creep trying to get into a room. I gave her my ID and she walked into the back room, I assumed to check my original paperwork. Maybe 3 to 4 minutes later, she walked back out and handed me my ID and my new key. I politely thanked her and went back to my room. I was kinda hungry, so I grabbed some chips that I had gotten at the airport out of my bag and started snacking while going through my phone. Maybe 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the hotel door. I peeked out the window, and to my surprise, 2 police officers were standing at my door. Of course, I immediately opened the door, and I asked, "Can I help you, officers?" They asked me if I had seen a suspicious man walking around the hotel. I hadn't seen anyone at all walking around, and I told them I hadn't. But if I did, I would give them a call. They asked for my ID, to take down my info, and for my phone number, so without even thinking about it, I gave them both. They thanked me and walked away. I thought it was pretty strange, though, that they didn't walk to the next room, or to any other room for that matter. They just got into their car and left. But again, I just brushed it off. I laid down and put on a movie, and I guess I dozed off because the next thing I knew, my wife was walking in the room. I looked at the time, and it was like 2:30 in the morning. I figured it would get pretty late, so I just asked her how her sister and the baby were. She said just an hour ago her sister finally gave birth to a beautiful little boy. I was happy for her, but so sleepy, so I laid back down and she joined me and we both fell right to sleep. About an hour later, my wife woke me up because my phone would not stop ringing. I looked and I had 6 missed calls from an unknown number. As I was looking at the missed calls, my phone began to ring again. I hesitated, but the curiosity got the best of me. I mean, they had called me so many times, it must be someone trying to reach me. So I answered. On the other side of the phone was a deep, distorted voice of a man. This is the Mexican cartel. If you don't listen, or you contact anyone, you and your wife will be executed. There is a black SUV outside your room. Get in. The man hung up, and I contemplated calling the police, but ultimately didn't because my wife had told me that the police would just tell the cartel we called. From what she told me, either we got in the car or we got murdered right there. We decided to do what they said, and we walked out our door, and in the parking space right outside of the door was a black SUV with dark tinted windows. As soon as we closed the hotel door, the SUV started and its lights blasted us in the face. My wife grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. We just looked at each other and walked towards the car. The back door was already open, so we got in and closed the door. I hesitated for a moment and thought about running, but I was afraid as soon as we stepped out, someone would shoot us. I couldn't see the driver because there was one of those walls between the driver and the back seat. The car started driving, and my wife and I just looked at each other and grabbed each other. I held on to her tight, and you could tell we were both thinking the same thing. We both thought it would be the last time that we ever held each other again. We drove for what seemed like an hour or so, through the empty desert, although I'm not exactly sure how long it really was, because when you think you're on your way to die, time goes extra slow. Up ahead, I could see some sort of buildings, but I couldn't tell what they were because they were all dark. As we got closer, I realized it was an entirely empty town. At this point, I kind of realized we might as well try to get away, because when we did get to wherever this car was taking us, we were probably going to die anyway. So I whispered to my wife that when the car would slow down, we had to try to jump out. She agreed, and we waited for the perfect moment. When the car slowed down to make a turn, I opened the door and we jumped out and ran. We ran down a small dark alley to another street, and from there into one of the buildings. After 30 minutes or so of hiding, I decided to peek out and see if I could see anything. When I looked out, I saw 3 different cars driving down the street, and I could see other lights on the other street ahead of us. They were definitely looking for us. I went back to hiding with my wife, and we didn't move until the sun was completely up. When we finally did get up and leave, there was nobody outside. We figured we were safe from the people searching for us, but now we were alone in the middle of nowhere. We ended up doing the only thing we could, walk until we hopefully found something. After 8 long miles in the hot desert, we finally see a main highway. We were so excited and got to the side of the highway and started trying to flag cars down. Finally, a big rig driver pulled over and picked us up. We explained what happened, and we told him we just needed a ride back to the city, and he couldn't be happier to help us. We were finally saved and couldn't be happier. We got back to the hotel and immediately packed our bags and left. We caught a cab to my wife's mother's house, and she told her family what happened while I called the American Embassy. They made a report, but it's now been 3 months and I haven't heard a word. I really don't think I want to, but honestly, I'm just glad me and my wife lived to see today. Thanks, guests, for your stay here at No Vacancy in room 66. Remember to leave your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe.